Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Sharpe. I'm an associate professor of philosophy at Deakin University, and I also teach at Thinking Academy. And you can see my website there. Today, I'm going to be talking about Stoicism, leading teams, and resilience. Stoicism is a philosophy that I've been working with, and as it were, it's been working with me for well over a decade. It's something that I use both professionally and existentially, if you like. So I'm going to be talking today about some basic Stoic ideas and then some basic applications of those ideas to leading in terms of leading with others and leading in terms of handling resilience and stress. Let me start with a story. If I can get this to move, there we are. Now, this is not a Stoic story with a capital S, but it's definitely a Stoic story with a small s. That is, it's perfectly consistent and illustrative, I believe, of Stoic ideas. Once upon a time, there was an old farmer who had worked with his crops for many years. One day, his horse ran away. Upon hearing the news, his neighbours came to visit. Such bad luck, they said sympathetically. You must be sad. What did our man say? He said, we'll see. The next morning, the horse returned, bringing with it two other wild horses. How wonderful, the neighbours exclaimed. Not only did your horse return, but you received two more. What great fortune you have. These neighbours always remind me of the book of Job. We'll see, answered the farmer. The following day, his son tried to ride one of the horses, was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbours again came to offer their sympathy. Now your son cannot help with your farming. They said, what terrible luck you have, up and down. We'll see, replied the old farmer. The following week, military officials came to the village to conscript young men in the army. Seeing that the son's leg was broken, they passed him by. The neighbours then congratulated the farmer on how well things had turned out. Such great news, they now said. You must be so happy. Well, what did our man say? He smiled to himself and once again said, we'll see. Now, this is a Chinese story. I believe it comes from the Confucian tradition. But as I say, it's perfectly consistent with Stoic principles and practice. So, what is Stoicism and why is it making such a comeback today? Stoicism is a philosophy that recognizes that in every life there will be adversity as well as prosperity because no one controls everything that happens to them. A person's character, they believe, is shown primarily by how they respond not to the good things, that's easy enough, although it brings challenges of its own, but how they respond to the bad, to adversity. The ideal person, the sage, is the best leader and exemplar. Stoicism is, in its own way, a philosophy of leadership. The principal figure is the ideal sage. Stoicism throughout the ages has been admired for this reason and many others by many leaders. Nelson Mandela, George Mattis, George Washington, Frederick the Great are just a few. Stoicism argues that virtue, strength of character, is the primary thing in a life well led and in leading others. What we actively do about what happens to us is far more important, they believe, than just what passively happens to us. We are subjects and agents as well as objects and things. Virtues, strengths of character, moderation, justice, courage, they are, the Stoics believe, or this is virtue in the singular, the key to success and happiness in a world in which we don't control everything. Everything does not depend on us, including things that happen to us. Wisdom is the directive virtue, encompassing them all, and it is about what to choose and what to avoid. The good news of Stoicism is that wisdom and the virtues can be trained. The bad news of Stoicism is that it's on us. We can train ourselves, we can take good exemplars, we can practice, we can read, we can think, we can reflect, we can make resolutions. But no one can do this for us. Virtue doesn't happen to us. Virtue is something we form and make. And here's something that you may have heard of, the dichotomy of control, which relates to everything I've just said. How much time do you spend worrying about things you can't control? How effective is that as a strategy with actually changing things? What if we redirected that time and energy to what we can change? This is, in a sense, the core practical idea of Stoicism. Modern Stoics have called it the dichotomy of control. What's not in our control? Natural events like pandemics, social structures, economic recessions, also significantly other people, what they say, what they do. What is in our control? Well, a small number of things which the Stoics say that Zeus has given to us, bequeathed to us on loan for as long as we're alive. And they are our thoughts about what is true and what is appropriate, our desires and aversions, what we want and what we want to avoid, and what we do and what we say to others in social settings. That is our piece of the universe that is ours, that is inalienable. And for the Stoics, it's the basis of our agency and our rational dignity. It's independent of race, gender, age, colour, or anything like that. Every adult has these capacities. They develop them better and worse, or more or less. So they're the key basic ideas of any account of Stoic ethics, Stoicism as a way of life. Now let's look at some applications for people who are in positions of leadership. 4 principles I want to talk about. Many other accounts have many more, but let's drill things down to the basics this morning. Firstly, aim to be worthy of success rather than aiming for success itself. What do I mean? The Stoics divide between what they call the goal, or the telos, and the target. The target is, looking at the dichotomy of control, which I've laid out there on that slide again, the target is on the side of what we can't control. It's how we usually think about things. We want to be rewarded by others and the world. We want not simply to play, we want to win the trophy. We want to be spoken about, lauded, praised. Going for the target is aiming for things we can't control, which the world can deliver us. It's about what we might call egoism, pride in self, how we appear, what in older times was called vainglory. For the Stoics, this can get in the way of effective action. What we should be aiming at, as far as the Stoics are concerned, is to do the best with what we can, what's available to us this side, our side of the dichotomy of control. I want to play the best football. We want to play the best football. We want to be the best team. Doesn't mean we don't want to win the trophy as well. Doesn't mean that that won't be good if it happens. But what we're going to do is focus on what we can do and not worry about what the world might or might not deliver us, particularly as we're facing other teams who are also striving for excellence. We want to do things that are worthy of being spoken about. We don't want to just be spoken about. And we could talk more about the Stoics' view on fame. This is to limit ourselves and focus ourselves on what we can do and what depends upon us. It's about ego and pride in work. Now, I don't know whether ego is the enemy for the Stoics. It's not really a Stoic category, but Stoicism is not about self-denial. It's not about not pursuing excellence. It's not about not engaging. It is about being humble and being honest as against egoism and blowing your own trumpet, which can get in the way of actually achieving the best and is, other things being equal for the Stoics, vicious. Secondly, prudence, self-knowledge, wisdom. A good life depends on knowing yourself. The Stoics recommend practicing self-examination. Seneca the Stoic in On Anger says every night, weekly, monthly, in periodic articulations. Ask yourself, what have I done well? Be honest with yourself. If you've done things well, take a quiet but not excessive pride in it. But also be honest with yourself. What hasn't worked? What haven't you done well? Don't beat yourself up on it about it. Don't stew over it, but identify them with honesty. Identify what can be done differently. We'll return to that, and resolve to do it. A nightly practice of self-examination, the Stoics argue, is the best way to keep accounts of yourself and keep yourself accountable. Thirdly, we are not fully in control of the world, and we don't have full knowledge of everything that is happening and that can affect what we wish for. Socrates, the Stoic hero, had said, "My wisdom consists in this: I know how much I do not know." What does this mean on the shop floor? A person, Epictetus the Stoic says, pictured there, is not going to try to learn anything that they think they already know. The first thing, if you want to do philosophy and get wiser, is going to require is to get rid of your presumption, your arrogance, your sense that you know it all already. A person is not going to try to learn anything that they think they already know. The world is full of people who seem to think that they know a lot, and perhaps a lot more than they do. And the Stoics will argue that this leads to bad decisions. Reminds me of a bumper sticker I once saw which made me laugh. Are you 19? Leave home while you still know everything. Obviously, that's ironic. No one knows everything, but many of us feel at 19 like we know a lot more, in particular, than our parents. Openness requires humility. If you become arrogant, you become closed. You become about defending certain territory, certain claims, certain reputation. This fixes you and bogs you down. Fourthly, in relation to self-examination, this is a more periodic thing, perhaps weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on. If you're running any kind of enterprise, even the enterprise of your life, it's always good to meditatively return to what your core values and principles are. Otherwise, habit can develop, life can get in the way. We're always fending off immediate demands and concerns. We can lose track of who we are and what we want to be and why we started out in the first place. Running a business, being a teacher, being a philosopher, whatever it might be, why did I start is a worthwhile question to periodically be asking yourself. Where have I deviated from that? Have the deviations been responses to change and through growth, or have they been falling away from what's actually important? So assess when you've departed from your core values or when they've changed. Assess when that change is positive. Be honest when it's a falling away. It's a forgetting. It's a being carried away, being caught up. Life got in the way. Somehow, as Jewel the singer said, your settings got stuck on survive rather than on thrive. If you don't know to which port you're sailing, the same Seneca says, all winds are unfavourable, or no wind is favourable. So the kind of leadership that's going to come out of trying to integrate a philosophy like this into your life, I'm going to call Stoic philosophical, and I'm going to oppose it with a nod to Plato, to the sophists, and I'm going to talk about a sophistic, irrational understanding of leadership, which I put to you is very widely practiced and praised, and you can perhaps think of eminent world leaders of the present or recent past who might embody it. It's all about irrational, sophistic leadership, executive top-down decision-making. The leader leads through fear in his followers, awe in his greatness, or his glory. The leader exempts themselves from the risks that they place others in. They divide their teams or their followers and set them against each other. The word followers is the right word here, perhaps disciples, certainly not team members. Loyalty as against contribution is what is prioritized from followers. Contrast that point for point with the Stoic philosophical post-Socratic way of thinking about leadership. Participatory discussion, but still executive decision-making. This is not a commitment to a perfectly egalitarian, flat organizational plan. But recognizing what I don't know as a leader, and hopefully having people on my team who I respect and who have expertise that is superior to mine in their areas, participatory discussion, executive decision-making. Leadership through proven capacity and by example, leaders sharing in the risks and challenges. Julius Caesar was a controversial figure and in many ways someone who is ethically problematic. But he was an inspirational leader and he got a lot done, whether we like it or not. And a lot of it was based on on his courage and sharing the hardships of his soldiers who would die for him because they knew he would die for them. Divide team members not through competition and fostering rivalry, misunderstanding, but by role expertise, and unite them by the goals that you share with them. Contribution is prioritised in this form of leadership, not loyalty. You want people to be loyal, but loyalty is not primary to you as a special individual. It will be loyalty through the goals that you share with the projects that you are undertaking. The irrational sophistic leadership is characterized by non-transparency. Let's say that the Stoic philosophical leadership, and I'm going to talk about this, will be characterized by principled transparency with accountability. All right, let's talk about some Stoic exercises for dealing with resilience now and handling stress. One of the things that any leader is going to be working with is uncertainty, anxiety, the potential to feel overwhelmed, the potential to become fearful about what may happen in the future. Now, calm is contagious. The Stoics valorize serenity and tranquility. They believe that people who are flourishing will be, in their inner life, generally speaking, they'll be characterized by tranquility, serenity, or what they even call apatheia, which means an absence of negative emotions. Okay, so what is stress for the Stoics? It involves anxiety, a feeling of being overwhelmed, and fear. So let's take up those three things in turn. Stress is anxiety about things which may or may not happen. Why? Think the dichotomy. Run the temporal sequence through the dichotomy of control. The past is what can't be changed. The future is what can't be changed. What can be changed is right now. So stress is anxiety about things that are happening in the future. Is the future in your control right now? No. What can I do about it? Well, it's not like I'm powerless. I can plan. I can make structured plans. I can get my team together and we can game out plans. We can also, and I'll talk about this more, premeditate adversities and obstacles and work out plan Bs and plan Cs. So if the worst comes to the worst, we'll still be responding as best we can. Will worrying help? No. At a certain level, stewing over things that may or may not happen is unproductive use of your mental energy, and it probably won't have great effects on your team if your team sees you worrying. The key Stoic idea in all of this, and with all of the emotions, is to try to keep cued into responding to the world, not our unexamined ideas about the world. We're upset not by things, says Epictetus in his manual or Enchiridion, a manual for Stoic life, but by our judgments concerning things. I always like to talk about the vampire analogy. Negative, adverse things happen, and we can or we cannot form negative judgments about them. And if we do form those negative judgments, then they will colour how we perceive the world. They will colour how we respond to the world. But think the vampires, they can only harm you if you let them across the threshold. It's a strange myth. I don't know whether Bram Stoker or the tradition was carrying Stoic wisdom, but I think it's a very good representation of the Stoic view about how negative emotions begin to take over our lives. Of course, negative things happen to people, adversities happen. We're not in control. Think the dichotomy. But do we always have to form negative judgments or feelings about them or disempowering judgments? We don't have to let the negativity across our threshold. If we do, as I say, we start responding to our negative feelings and the way they have painted the external world internally as against the world itself. The vampires cross the threshold of our inner lives, but the Stoics believe we have the power to refuse entry. We can think of adversity in different ways. We can train ourselves to respond to events in different ways, not our impressions of events. We can try to learn how to become aware of our negative emotions, impressions, and effects, objectify them as events in the world, put them aside if they're not helpful, and stay focused on what's going on outside ourselves. How does this work in terms of stress? The second part of stress, feeling overwhelmed. Well, divide what's outside from your response. Divide your impressions, emotions, and inner feelings in response to an external event from what has actually happened. A recession has come. Many people will feel depressed, they will feel anxious, they will feel stressed, they will feel worried. They are events in the world, they're psychological events. Um, they're not the same as the event itself. The recession is a structured economic phenomena affecting millions of people over which no one of us has individual control. Then say to each of your impressions, you're only an impression and not what you appear to be. You're part of me, not part of the world. But the best me responds to the world. So then try to lighten the load by focusing only on things outside yourself that you can change. How does this look when you've got a big project that might be stressing you out or facing big challenges? Every big task, Marcus Aurelius tells himself in the Meditations, remember this guy was a Roman emperor, is generally speaking a lot of small parts. We can break them down and sequence them. Then we can ask ourselves of each little step, as against the big overwhelming thing, is this little step worth worrying about? There's 12 things I need to do to overcome this crisis. Is step 1 enough for me to freak out? Well, probably not. Okay, what about step 2? Actually, I can do step 2 as well. Step 3, it's going to be tricky, but I reckon I can hang in there, and so on and so forth. And then before you know it, you got to step 12, and you've solved the big problem. A good leader will also use their team. If you have expertise and you've got 12 steps, you've got 9 guys out there who can do as well or better on 9 of those 12 steps, you're mad not to delegate, you're inefficient not to delegate, and you're not efficiently using the resources that you have at your disposal. Okay, so we've looked at stress as anxiety. It's in the future. Dichotomy. We've looked at stress as being overwhelmed. Divide your impressions from the things, divide the things into parts. Thirdly, there's the fear. Anxiety is a worry that things may happen in the future and that when they happen, we may not have the capacities to cope. And that's what produces the panic fear. So the Stoics recommend what they call a premeditation of adversities. Just bite the bullet. The worst may happen. It's not fully in your control. A recession may happen. It may affect your sector in particular. There may be challenges that you'd really rather weren't yours, but they aren't yours anyway because they belong to a wider economic system. If you plan for the worst virtually, but you can do this in a team with others, not just to say, oh my gosh, we're going under, but to say, well, even if the worst happens, what can we do? What will the resources be that we still have when everything else is taken from us? How can we prepare these resources? This is an anti-fear, anti-anxiety, anti-stress. It's not about dwelling on the bad, not just accepting them fatalistically in advance, but being ready just in case. It's about the dichotomy and accepting the consequences of the dichotomy. If we don't control everything, things are going to happen that we potentially don't particularly like. Are we prepared or aren't we prepared? If we prepare and we still succeed, or if we prepare and the worst doesn't come to pass, that's another kind of win. So I've borrowed this from Massimo Pigliucci, a leading modern Stoic. Tomorrow you've got an interview, either you get the job, great, or you don't. Well, if you don't, it won't be the end of the world. But the one in the middle, I think, is the vital one. Your self-worth does not depend on this. You're more and other than any particular challenge and crisis that you face, and you will have resources to deal with any crisis that emerges. Try to treat adversity, that is to say, as a learning opportunity. We don't lose, we learn. Adversity tests boundaries, challenges established ways of doing things. It also provides opportunities to change. The old thing hasn't worked. We've got to come up with a new thing. Maybe we can grow. We can never know whether adversity may not end up being the greatest kind of gift. Edith Eger, Holocaust survivor, made a choice, she tells us. A very similar choice to Viktor Frankl. The choice was that the Nazis could take everything, even her body and her life, away from her. They could not take away her soul. And she survived. She found ways to survive and then became an effective and wonderful contributor to literature and to psychology. Think back to our farmer. We'll see. We'll see. The recession has come. It's terrible. We'll see. Let's talk now about leading others, and then I'll be finished for this class. Begin in the morning, Marcus says, by saying to yourself, I'm not going to meet perfect people. I'm going to meet people who aren't perfect in different ways, in all likelihood. He's a Roman emperor. These are intimations of the court of his time. Busybodies, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsociable people. They're more likely to be the kinds of people that I meet. This is a meditation that Marcus says he tries to do every morning. But I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly. The negativity of others, according to Stoicism, is not something that by itself can affect us negatively unless we assent to let the vampire in. Nor can I be angry with my kinsman, and this is the positive side of the philosophy, nor hate him, for we are made for cooperation, like feet, hands, eyelids, the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature. Stoicism has a reputation for being an egoistic philosophy because it is about giving yourself the oxygen so you can help others. But it is about community and about helping others. We are rational, social creatures that belong to a community, a local community, a national community, an international community, perhaps a cosmic community. We are interconnected with all others. And this is not something that is just a nice sentiment. It's something they take very seriously as a philosophical position. So, leading a team using the Stoic philosophical approach, just a few little tips that I think are very consistent with the philosophy. First of all, if you're going to be consultative in terms of learning what you can and growing, keep known times for others to consult with you. Encourage your team members in these times to speak frankly and inform you of their specific expertise, tasks, and concerns. Now we're mapping back onto what are my limits? What do other people do better than I can? What can I be enhanced by engaging with? Don't look at correction as criticism and criticism as attack. Above all, this is what happens when we let our ego get in the way, or our egoism, to use my earlier slide. Someone's correcting me, they're criticizing me, they're bringing me down, they're reducing my social capital. I need to respond by trying to bring them down. That's not a productive response. We're not treating that criticism as a potential learning opportunity. If you change course, which you will need to, facing a world that's out of your control, let those affected know why. Don't let them perceive you as someone who is arbitrary, who is tyrannical, who is unpredictable. This does not grow trust. It does not grow a team spirit. It grows a sense of distance between you and your workers, but that's not consistent with the Stoic model of leadership. Take accountability, share in the risks that you give to others. Don't count yourself out, if you like. You're a leader, but you're not a god. Here are 4 things to avoid. Again, these are, I think, insights that the Stoics have, which others have as well, and maybe others have through the percolation of Stoic ideas, through the tradition and traditions. Okay, micromanagement is generally going to be perceived by workers as a lack of respect and trust. Know yourself and know your limits. That means knowing who around you knows more than you and who around you can enhance your team's performance. Avoid not making your expectations and plans clear to those affected by them, as I've said. Do not without cause violate team members' expectations. Take them with you as team members. Don't kind of hit them with things that they weren't expecting, as if you were above them in some qualitative sense and you didn't have an obligation to try to be accountable to them. Don't without cause punish, exclude, or remove a person from a role. Negative expression of a positive principle, which is to treat others with respect. On the flip side, don't artificially inflate someone without reason or for reasons that aren't related to operational performance. They're good looking, for example. Don't accept reports against others in your team without applying natural justice. Now, this should be really obvious, but the prevalence of bullying, workplace bullying in our community suggests that it isn't. If someone comes to you with a complaint, hear the complaint, but also commit to hearing the other side and let the complainant know that that's the case. Commit to bringing the disputants together so they can hear each other's side, understand the other's reasons, and try to mediate between them. If you do this, you will not have problems with toxic workplaces developing under your leadership. So this is about the Socratic principle of gentleness towards others and sternness towards oneself, consistent, of course, with the standards of technical excellence that apply in your field. Here's a quote from a historian about Marcus Aurelius. If someone did something good, he praised them, and he used him in the task in which he excelled. But he didn't take the rest of his conduct into consideration. He didn't expect people to be good at everything because they were good at one thing. He used to say that it was impossible to create men the way one would like them to be, but it was fitting to use men such as they are for the tasks in which they are useful. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, talking about delegation, but also talking about knowing his own limits and the limits of others. What about criticizing others? Here's Epictetus, the teacher of Marcus Aurelius, author of the Discourses and Manual. With regards to those who are different from him, he's talking about the sage, the perfect leader. He will be patient, gentle, delicate, and forgiving, as he would towards someone in a state of ignorance who missed the mark when it came to the most important things. He will not be harsh to anyone, for he will have perfectly understood Plato's words. Every soul is deprived of the truth against its will. People go wrong. Generally speaking, they're pursuing what they consider to be the best course of action. They've just developed mistaken ideas. If the Stoics understand this idea, which is Socratic, it's in order to practice clemency as well as stern justice with others. If he is wrong, Marcus says to himself in his meditations, instruct him to that effect with benevolence and show him what he has overlooked. If you don't succeed, then be mad at yourself, or rather, don't even be mad at yourself. So, some basic Stoic principles for leading in teams, for delegating, things not to do, and now the difficult part of leadership, which is correcting others, which can cause discontent if it isn't done with justice, with clemency, and with an understanding that people will be doing what they consider to be the best. Thank you very much for listening. My name's Matt Sharpe. I work at Deakin University. I'm at Thinking Academy. I'm the author of Stoicism, Bullying and Beyond, How to Keep Your Head When Others Around You Have Lost Theirs and Blame You. Also, Philosophy as a Way of Life, History, Dimensions and Directions, which is part of the Reinventing Philosophy as a Way of Life series at Brill. My webpage, you can see there, I blog under Castalian Stream on Stoicism, philosophy, issues around bullying, issues around psychology. So thanks for listening, and good day to you.